Hello, 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 hello. It's good to see you. Say hello.
Welcome to the Huskies Hockey Podcast. Weldie sitting with Andrew. Weldie here from St. Cloud, where we have relatively about 10 inches of fresh, densely packed powder on the ground. And a friendly reminder to everybody who rushed home to watch TRL after school, don't shovel this, please. I hope you have a blower by now. If not, pay for someone to blow out your driveway, because this is not the type of snow that you can easily just kind of go out there and push around with a shovel. It is dense out there.
I think the technical term is heart attack snow.
Exactly. Your heart's either gonna stop or your back's gonna go out. One of the two. So I would, or just wait a week, because it'll be in the 50s here soon. So hopefully. Got a stocked pantry,
or you really want to go to urgent care
and
go out and break your back.
Yeah, exactly. The cost to have someone plow out your driveway is a lot cheaper than urgent care, I would imagine.
And same here. I mean, you're looking at me with sleeves on, sitting here in Tucson at a nippy 59 degrees.
Oh wow. I don't know how
unseasonably cool.
Yeah.
It's getting rough.
So Pairwise Day came and went. Huskies' name was not called after the loss, 5-4 overtime loss to University of Denver University. The Pioneers end up in a back and forth affair that had the Huskies on the wrong side of it there at the end when we got boyumed. It's kind of the best way, and I am already sick of Zeev and Matica, for that matter. Maybe I should have probably saved this stat, but last 3 games for Denver, Matica and Zeev combined for 10 points in 3 games. It's just
is that good?
Yeah, that's pretty good for Denver. Denver ends up winning the Frozen Faceoff. I was there, and we can just kind of go dive.
So you were the fan that was there.
I was the fan. Oh, there was dozens of us.
Yeah,
so
lots of empty seats. We'll get to that aspect of it, I'm sure, but yeah, the fitting way, I suppose, to end the season. And you started the season back in October with a 5-4 loss, back and forth where you couldn't maintain a lead, and sloppy defense and sloppy goaltending. And then you ended the season in much the same fashion. The quality of opponent obviously is a little bit different from St. Thomas in October to Denver in March, but a lot of the same problems that we saw in the early part of the year either didn't go away or reared its ugly head, whatever way you want to put it. This was a recipe for a loss that we saw too often this time. For
played out exactly the same as how many countless times. We've read this story before, or to all the Taylor Swift fans out there, I think I've heard this song before, but I didn't like the ending. And that's exactly how everything ended up.
Yeah. Taking a 1-goal lead 4 straight times or 4 different times during that game, never trailing up until the final goal was scored by Zeev Buium, which Matica, I would imagine he's going to be around for another year, but we're probably done with Zeev.
God,
probably good for the Huskies, because he's going to be a top 10 pick this year. It might depend on, if whoever drafts him is in like tank mode and they don't really want to burn a year of him yet. I don't know exactly how that works, the contracts, draft picks and whatnot, but maybe it wouldn't matter. But I would assume he looks like he's ready for the next level. I don't know what he needs to prove at the college level anymore. Starts this game and ends it with 2 plays that make St. Cloud defenders look silly. Vitti in the first period and Wiley in overtime. In a sense, like that's, I guess it softens the wound a little bit to be beaten by who's turned out to be, I still think, is the current top scorer among defensemen in the country as an 18-year-old. I mean, that guy's high-end talent. So, I mean, in that respect, you let one of the best players in the country beat you. But certainly a lot of other unforced errors and goals and mistakes that weren't caused by, let's call it, high-end talent from the opponent. You did shoot yourself in the foot a fair amount of times, which is frustrating. And where do we start? I don't know if we want to list off the litany of mistakes. But
I guess
there were 3 of them.
Yeah, I guess the silver lining here is that it wasn't the dusty third, fourth liners that you've never heard of before beat you. So I guess that's something to be a little bit proud of. With like I said, Zeev and Matica. I do have one quick correction that I have to make.
You done messed up, Aaron!
Live correction from my wife who walked by. Sent me a text, says it's, I think I've seen this film before, but I didn't like the ending. So that's the lyric. She's a big Evermore fan, so it's understandable that she is that she would kind of come in with that correction. So I apologize.
That's interesting because I'm a big Paramore fan.
Oh, okay.
So I get it.
Yeah, exactly. So all right, let's get into it. And again, stop this podcast if you've heard it, but I mean, don't stop this podcast, but you've heard all this before. Huskies score 2 minutes in, quick goal. Cooper Wiley gets the goal, and you're kind of thinking, all right, we're in Davis. We're in him early.
Not a very good goal for him to give up.
No, not a good goal, and not a good goalie. So it's all fitting. So I'm like, all right, we've got some momentum here. Zeev comes back, about, I think it's 8 minutes later.
7 minutes later.
7 minutes
which
later.
I guess is good for the Huskies.
Yeah.
That usually comes a minute later.
Yeah.
But so they had to wait a little bit.
Absolutely turns around Vitti Mienin. Heck of a move by Zeev, and is able to rifle the puck past Posh. Makes it a tie game, but the Huskies answer back about 2 minutes later. Nick Port's a little face-off play, finds the lane, able to drive it in again. Probably not the best goal for Davis.
Although that's, according to Starman, that's the Mike Bossy play. Certainly heard the name a little bit before my time, but apparently Mike Bossy scored some goals like that.
Mike Bossy, I think, scored goals every way. So, I mean, I'll take it from the Long Island
of the more trademark ways. Like I said, I would hope that he knows what he's talking about, coming from a Long Island resident in Starman.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm more surprised Ports was kind of playing. I'm like, oh, wow. Second goal of the year. Nice to join the party there, Nick Ports. First goal since October. And really hadn't been playing much at all, except in the last couple of weekends. And so I think, who has he been in for? Because it's not like he was really scratching at the door. I know Ryman's been hurt.
I think
Molinar
being
Ashan as well.
Ashan.
So I mean, probably the only reason that he's in the lineup is these injuries that we've been mentioning, and certainly not an expected source of goal scoring there. And I think that would be another one. And then, was it the second goal for Denver, or was it the third one? It was the second one, right? That one's the one Posh has to have back.
Yeah, the behind the net and not getting over the post.
Slow to move around. It was, and at that point, it kind of was like, this is a battle of bad goaltending at this point. I would still put the Booyam plays. Not much Posh can do about that. Davis looked worse than Posh just because he gave up more bad goals, and Denver had a strong shot advantage in the game. And Posh wasn't terrible, but that one certainly hurt.
That one
because
especially.
again, that's another one where you could have gotten out of that period up 2-1. Instead, it's 2-2. Kind of a backbreaker in terms of momentum going into the second period.
And that's one too, where it's like you talk about backbreakers, and it's just like you're out of that period 2-1. I'm kind of feeling I'm feeling good. You know, I think, you know, I'm really optimistic about how the rest of the game is going to go. 2-2, giving up a late goal like that, you're like, we can't find the separation, and sure enough, we never did the rest of the game. We couldn't find that extra gear, that extra goal. Not that we would have hung on to it anyway, but we still we couldn't get that separation. We always kind of let Denver hang around and keep the pressure.
Yeah, and before the first Bouillon goal, about 8 minutes into the game or whatever, it just struck me that kind of what we were talking about last week, where Denver didn't have a ton on the line this weekend. It seemed, I wouldn't say they're at half speed, but maybe 3/4 speed. Like, I don't think that they really thought that this was a must win, certainly. We did see the same type of Denver team that we saw in St. Cloud, 3 or 4 weeks ago. And because of that, I thought that they were a little bit more vulnerable. And we have these situations not uncommonly in conference tournament championship weekend, where it's the team that has more on the line comes to play a little bit more than the team that's comfortable and just kind of waiting until the regionals start. And that's what I kind of thought. And then even with the Bouillon play, again, and credit to a great player making a great play there. But, you know, I thought, again, after that first period, if he didn't give up that one at the end, feeling fairly decent, as well as you can in a game against Denver, a team that officially really has the Huskies number now, going winless against them in 5 games this year. But yeah, so that was a big key for Denver, was to get that goal before the end of the first to tie it up. But thinking too, another quick goal for the Huskies coming into the second period, admitted in Ingram, another little, it was a nice little play, 2-on-1, kind of late developing 2-on-1. Was it Okabe that fed him the pass, but still kind of a leaker through the 5-hole for Davis. Did Ingram kind of whiffed on the shot.
Yeah. Werner sent him the pass. Okabe was the pass that started the.
He was the stretch pass.
Yeah.
Right. But again, so another one, and maybe the whiff shot kind of fooled Davis a little bit. But
I talked about it last week. You shoot him, you threw the goaltender, it goes through the 5-hole, you're in the goalie's head that way, and you know they're not tracking the puck well. You got to make the most out of these chances that they come up, and just do everything you can to try to stifle that Denver offense. But sure enough, Huskies take a penalty. With
unforced penalty with Kupka offensive zone. Both penalties that St. Cloud takes in this entire game. Just 3 penalties total, 2 for the Huskies, 1 for Denver. Both Huskies penalties were complete, just unneeded plays. The Kupka play being an offensive zone penalty. We'll get to the Wiley 5-minute major. Another just, what are you doing kind of play that I thought was going to sink them right then and there.
Yeah, same
but
here.
But the Kupka play, too, that was another kind of momentum killer. Because, again, 3-2 lead. What is it, 4 minutes later, takes the penalty. And on a play that just didn't really do anything. It just it was a physicality in purpose of nothing. And so Matica comes back and promptly ties the game, which we were not surprised by at all.
Which, by the way, that whole setup was just a hell of a setup and a hell of a shot from a hell of a player. So it was, you know, giving props to Denver for getting that one set up, but kind of using that bumper as a one-timer and was able to just lay into one. That one, I think there was nothing really Posh can do on that one.
Yeah, and then, but St. Cloud able to convert on their own power play opportunity, the only one of the game for them, with a nice play. Hall gets the goal, picking up the trash on the rebound chance, but a nice play by him, just kind of outmaneuver, step around Davis and put in the empty net type goal. but some good movement on that power play as well. And again, it's one of these getting another 1-goal lead, the fourth time that game where they're able to get a 1-goal lead. Yes, I was similar to you saying just stretch it out, get it. That's that 2-goal lead. But in the back of my mind there, it's like, well, what's happened when we've had 2-goal leads? Don't have as good of a, even, don't have no better record in that situation than just 1-goal games. So it's not even that. Like, I needed a 3-goal lead to really be confident. But another one of these late goals in a period, and it's Matica again, scoring with under 2 minutes to go in the second period to tie it up. And again, it's of the ones that Posh gave up, it's really the Webster goal in the first period that was the one that was really egregious. The others are good skill plays made by good skill players, and it just was surprising, as we mentioned too, that it didn't come during that 5-minute major against Wiley. Because at that time, with 4-3, I said the only question, I texted a friend, the only question is are they just going to tie it, or are they going to take the lead during this power play? And I predicted 3 goals, somewhat of a reverse jinx kind of a purpose, but whatever, it worked because holding them off the board during that major penalty was a good momentum swing for the Huskies, even though, again, it would have killed any sort of forward momentum you'd have had after the Hall goal, playing on your heels for 5 minutes, just trying to kill that power play. It really, after that penalty, any sort of momentum the Huskies had where they were able to get 4 1-goal leads up to that point, pretty much since that penalty, that they were just chasing the rest of the game. They had to kill off that 5-minute major. And then that third period, it just was the amount of chances they had were limited. They still had some great A's in the third, which we'll get to. But it was really Denver in control from that point forward. And I think that was, even though Denver didn't score on that power play, it was a key turning point, because it was Denver's game to lose, even still being down 4-3 after killing that penalty off. They just were in control possession wise and the majority of scoring chances and shots wise, really after that penalty. And so I think that was definitely a big key. And again, just a penalty that didn't need to happen.
It was, you have that 5-minute major, it's killed off, and usually you'll kind of see a little bit of a press from the other team. The momentum kind of comes. But it was like another 2 minutes or so of just pressure by Denver, and you could tell the Huskies were just hanging on. And then I believe there was a whistle, and I was like, okay, we can kind of get everything back and squared away. Let's just finish this period. And then, it was shortly after that, they got that kind of weird bounce that Matica was able to kind of get in front of the net and able to tip that one in. And after that, it was just like, these guys aren't going away, and we're not making it any easier on ourselves. It's just, it was disheartening going into that third period tied, when again, it was, you had 4 different chances, 1-goal leads, and you couldn't keep them off the board. You can separate, much like all season.
And at that point too, it's shades of the second game in Denver in January, where it was also 4-4. After the second period. In that game, though, the third period was a real impressive period for the Huskies, out shooting them, I think, 18-3. We almost kind of saw the reverse of that. Not that lopsided a shot advantage for Denver, but just 3 shots in the period for the Huskies. Like I said, it was, they got 11 shots combined from the second period to the end of the game.
Now, granted, Gross's grade A chance did not count as the shot on goal
because it hit the post. Yeah, that one, and then there was another great. I think Werner on the doorstep had another great opportunity. Those were the 2 that stand out. Aside from that, though, I can't really remember any other threat for the Huskies offensively, and Posh had to come up with some big saves in that third period just to get the game to overtime. But that third period is just coming into overtime. I didn't have a very good feeling about it, because the way the third period had unfolded and not able to bury those chances, especially the Gross one. It's like you'd think that if that goes in, obviously the game, would they have blown it a fifth time, perhaps? But that was kind of a backbreaker, and he kind of sensed it when it unfolded in real time. But and then with overtime too, it's just I just never had a very good feeling about it. And sure enough, the Booyam, the star player for one of the stars for Denver, again, kind of undresses Wiley, and
Wiley got caught.
Puts the dagger.
Just flat out, he was playing too aggressively in his own zone, and he was almost on the left defensive side of center ice. And basically, instead of, backing up, he decided to kind of play a pinch to Sam Harris, who was able to find Zeev, who Cooper tried to go ahead and get on his horse back. You're not going to catch Zeev. At that point, I was like, just hack him. I mean, because you got the Denver power play, which, yeah, maybe they score on that anyway, but I would take my chances against the Denver power play, even clipping it, the percentage that they're at versus a Booyam breakaway. But I can understand also not wanting to take a penalty in overtime. So.
Maybe he just couldn't. He was so beaten that he couldn't even compensate by taking a penalty. It's just in a blink of an eye, he was gone, and kind of barely had to tuck it in there. He almost was going too fast for Posh or towards the net there, but he was able to finish it. And desperation challenge aside, pretty academic. What else? Why not?
Exactly.
Over. Might as well, pray for offsides.
Maybe there's
something
you could. Yeah, exactly.
But if anything, that only negatively affected Lenny Hoffman's replay percentage conversion rate this year. But why not? That's your season's done. If not, so. But that was not surprising. That was going to come back unchallenged.
Yeah.
And so that was it. That's all she wrote.
And with that, everyone knew season was over because prior to that, we found out that Quinnipiac lost in the tournament, which any hope of an at-large bid, the small chances that St. Cloud did have, kind of hindered on Quinnipiac being the lone ECAC representative.
That was the only chance for them to win, to get in without winning the NCAC tournament.
Exactly.
You still needed to win the Denver game.
Well, yes, correct. So you knew that you had to win the tournament in general. So, but obviously the Denver game you needed to win too. So, but yeah, so everyone knew season ended right there, just as the season has gone. Kind of the same old story, and it's just kind of capping off the game. It's I don't know. I get so much flashes of what I like, but then just so much of just everything kind of crumbling. And everyone was talking on Twitter, and I won't say everyone, but a lot of the talk that I saw was, we would have been 13th, we would have been 12th in the pairwise if it was this game, or if this would have happened, or if that goal would have been called, for Rowe, or when Rowe was behind, blah, blah, blah. And I think it's we could play that game all we want, but in the end, it's the fact that all of them didn't go our way, and you had so many chances to not be in this position, and you ended up in that position because of it. Is kind of why it's we just ended up on the wrong side of the bubble on pairwise day, and in the end, we weren't a team, I think, that deserved to be in the NCAA tournament, in my opinion. So it's just I like the idea of Posh going all games. I thought he was our best chance to win. That eventually kind of led Dominic Bassi, who's now in the transfer portal. So he'll find a new home, I would imagine, somewhere. And, kind of tells me also that Blackhawks probably gave up on him, or at least want another year and don't care if he walks after his next year of eligibility. But yeah, I'm not going to mourn that aspect of it, but just kind of a sad way to end the season, but kind of a predictable way of how everything went this year.
Yeah, it was a frustrating year, for sure. I was playing around with the customizer. I didn't come up with one where just flipping one win would have made the difference. I came up with two. You're 2 wins away. Where if you would have flipped, and I was just looking at the 2-goal blown lead games. The ones, I think they all went to overtime. So this would just been the difference of flipping overtime results in 2. Pick any of them. Doesn't matter if it was the St. Thomas one, or St. Thomas wasn't one of the 2-goal ones, but that was one of the ones I changed as well, because they were the lowest team in pairwise that St. Cloud lost to. But even just one of those, or the Duluth 2-goal coughing up disaster, I couldn't get into the top 13 with just flipping 1. I was able to do that flipping 2. Again, I don't know if that softens the wound, or perhaps there is one flip with just a single game would have made the difference. But as it turned out, I mean, finished the year at 17, 16, and 5. That's not going to be good enough to make the tournament in most years. And the fact that you could have gotten in with 19, 14, and 5, it would have been kind of surprising. Especially if you're like an Arizona State fan who wouldn't understand the math there at all. But 17 wins ain't gonna cut it in pretty much any year. It's they got the same amount of wins that the women's team did this year. Both sort of frustrating second halves for both teams, and they both ended up the same amount of victories as it turned out. And so that's disappointing.
Oddly poetic. Actually,
I remember we had talked about, like, has the women's team ever had more victories than the men's team in any season? I don't believe they had. We had fact checked that.
Correct.
And for a while, it looked like the women's team was going to break their season high or as a program this year. But I think 18 is still the record there in the year that you covered the team.
Yep.
And so falling short, both men and the women's this year in terms of that. And I don't know, I was a little discouraged. The one thing that I didn't like with Larson's post game and kind of de facto post season, like season summary, what he's doing after the game, where he gets in, it's kind of like low key gaslighting when he's like, a lot of people call this a rebuilding year. And it's just like, well, I picked them to be first in the conference. And yeah, you can say that I'm a moron that was doing that, but you picked them second. They were third in the preseason poll when they got 2 first place votes in that preseason NCHC poll, which is a coach's poll. That doesn't scream rebuilding to me. But I said this too on the show after October. I almost said it out loud to warn myself, is that because we kind of saw this in 1920 as well, where they got off to a terrible start. But then there's going to be a weekend where they play really well. Like in that year, they had a weekend where they either swept North Dakota or they took 5 out of 6 points, something like that. North Dakota's really good that year. And they kind of made a little bit of a late surge in conference play. And if those kind of results come towards the end of a season, which started so disappointingly, it can kind of mess with your impressions of the season because the good results are backloaded. Now, in this case, it was a little different because the best results were sort of in the middle of the season in November and December. We started the year with terrible October, and we ended the year with a prolonged second half slide. But I stopped short of giving Larson or any of the on the staff credit for like getting the most out of a rebuilding team, because that was not the narrative coming into the season. And while there was a fair amount of turnover, you lost Cranley, you lost Meyer in the offseason, among others, But every team loses players like that on a yearly basis. Yeah. And the hallmark of good teams is able to not rebuild, but to reload. And this is a program that we thought was in that category, and that Larson had been able to do that over the last few years. And so yes, there was a fair amount of young guys on the team and yada, 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 but we had more confidence that this team could be able to transition to a new group of players more on the fly and with fewer bumps in the road that we saw this year. And it's harder to take a season like this where you were so close in so many games that you let slip away, where the margin from hitting the golf course once that 10 inches of snow melts versus maybe trucking out to Maryland Heights this coming weekend was the fact that you were in so many games that you just, for one reason or another, or for a lot of the same reasons in these games, you kind of beat yourself, which makes it, like I said, one of the more frustrating years in recent memory.
Yeah, that year it was, February. We kind of hit that good stretch, that 1920 season. We swept Miami. We took 5 points out of Colorado College, but then 5 points out of North Dakota, and then we beat Denver 5-1.
And I think after that game, I'm like, this team's making the tournament. And I was like that confident about it. But then Denver kind of handled them the second game.
Yep.
And then was it the weekend after they went up to Duluth and got hammered?
Yep.
And then that was then COVID came.
Yep.
Yeah.
Then
so COVID. I mean So that was, and it's a 6-month season. You're going to have highs. You're going to have lows. Every team will, except if you're Stonehill. But every team's going to go on a decent little run. Like look at Bowling Green. Remember when they were like in second place all of a sudden? It's like teams like that can even have a brief run of success that can get the fans all excited again. This was just a year where there was ultimately, over the course of that 6-month schedule, too many lows and not enough highs. And the only people they have to blame for not making the tournament this year is just the guys in that locker room. It's not the math's fault. Like, we can talk about like the CC fans, if they're rightfully upset over the pairwise with UMass sneaking in ahead of them. You don't even have that to put, hang your hat on. This was in your grasp. It just slipped through your fingers because of sloppiness and kind of the same mistakes happening too consistently throughout the year. Let's hope that the guys that remain on this team for next year can use this as some sort of motivation to not miss the tournament, which I like the fact that we can use that we have a high bar of success here, and that the standard should be NCAA tournament. And to not make that standard, I think is fair to say that qualifies as a disappointment, as a failure of a season.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's saying it too harshly. This is not a program like Omaha, which makes the tournament once every 5 years in their program history. This is now a rarity, a year where you sit out the NCAA tournament. And hopefully that stings to the players in that locker room who are going to be on this team going forward. And let's hope this doesn't happen again next year.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of interesting because I had a conversation with Go Huskies Woo, who did also say, honest to God, this team reminds me of the team that made before the team that made the Natty. So the COVID season. So the fact that you also kind of brought up that, and Go Huskies Woo, I had that conversation with him a couple days ago, makes me think that you are Go Huskies Woo. So we found the source. Andrew says he's not on Twitter, only on Green Ground, and now
that we'd have to retcon that whole Huskies all-time draft episode. That must mean that I'm like a Michael Winslow type of like voice artist like I'm doing police academy here.
Right.
I trust you to believe I am not go Huskies. Woo.
Okay, fair enough.
I thought you were gonna say you had a conversation with him face to face at the X.
I might have in the past. And not
He's
knowing
very
who it was.
close to the vest
exactly.
about his identity, and I'm not saying that because I know he wears vests.
It's
I
Bob
almost would
Motzko,
like that.
actually. Big swerve. Motzko is go Huskies. Woo.
That would be good.
Loves those vests. So, I guess to kind of wrap up the Denver game before we talk about the national tournament in general and other games and the rest of the Frozen Faceoff, do you have a POW?
Oh boy, I haven't even thought about it.
Yeah, you know what? Honestly, neither did I. Go Huskies Woo. Kind of jarred my memory. My POW will be Ann Horn ? Maybe ? So I guess that's just how much thought we have into this. It's kind of a weird game to give out a POW.
It was a weird game.
So
I mean, you had 4 goals.
Mm-hmm.
No one had more than 1 point. Peart with a +3. We all know plus minus is a unquestioned stat. Boy, there's no real one that's standing out. Wiley, I mean, like I said, he didn't like the penalty he took in the last play. The season ended with him being undressed. Ports, I just mentioned to him, like I was surprised he's even in the lineup. You know, Barrett Hall's been playing. I thought he played pretty well in the Western Series and gets a goal here. He's kind of bookended his season well, I thought. Well, got Barrett Hall. I could be here all game going through the roster. Let's just give it to Barrett Hall.
Yeah, he did have 3 points in the last 2 games, including 2 goals. So.
Excited to see him come back next year as a guy that, well, we hope come back next year. But I think he's a guy that's ready to take the next step up.
Yep, I think so too. Yeah, overall, I actually liked Okabe's game. I don't know enough to give him a POW. But
you won't ever be able to give him a POW anymore.
Nope. So maybe a send off, a body of work POW. Let's give return.
I hope you got 16 more points that you actually did this year, because we might have won those 2 extra games. Kind of a spite POW.
Ooh, that's not gonna do it. I'll go Ingram.
Minnesota nice POW.
Just to be different.
Ingram. Okay.
So.
Yeah, not a candidate that sticks out across the board.
Yeah,
but that may be fitting that this is how it ends.
That's how it ends. So sure enough, Denver ends up winning against Omaha in kind of a snoozer of a game on Saturday. But it overall, I was down for the event. Went to Zamboni's, which used to be Eagle Street, which used to be, something else. The fact that, it's not the same, like so much rotation when it comes to that bar, like literally right across from the X, is kind of a surprise to me, but they actually made kind of a cool layout change. We got the bar kind of wrapping around now right in the center versus
that's not the one that used to be Tom Reed's.
No, Tom Reed's is like 2 blocks down.
That's different.
Yeah, that's
right?
Yeah, that's different. That's going to stay
pretty sure I know what you mean by Eagle Street, because you're saying that's a different name now.
Yeah,
Zamboni's is what it's called.
Okay, it's called a little on the nose, but it's fine. But like attendance 15,000 for the whole weekend. Really kind of shows there's not a surprise as to why the NCHC is moving to campus sites. I bet
the only reason they're going there next year is because they're contractually obligated. And I'm wondering if they're like, is it possible for us to like not cut our losses here and maybe just take a $2,000 loss, pay off the X for a little bit, and just get out of the contract and go to campus next year?
And I would assume like the X would wouldn't mind that either, not having to schedule around it for something. But
they still, I mean, they still play like the Wild will play on that Saturday afternoon.
They did
they
this
do
game.
that this year?
Yep.
I know last year they did too. So they're still like, wow, this is still a Wild building, even if you've renting it out this weekend, for 3 games at least. But I didn't get to see any of the Omaha North Dakota game because I was at work. Even that game with like North Dakota being there seemed to be a dip in attendance.
Yeah.
And atmosphere wise, how that was also a flop.
And it was kind of interesting. Like, I did kind of roll my eyes at the comment too, but I did hear some people talking about it. And, at this point, I think they were still fairly certain they were going to be able to go to Sioux Falls. So I heard a lot of people saying that they were just going to go to the regional next week. Or like they have some buddies that usually go, but they were just going to go to that. Or it's like, we already know we're in the tournament. We don't really have a lot to play for. So like the fan enthusiasm isn't exactly there. So I don't know if that did have anything to do with it, but it's just the event is just a shell of its former self. And it's just kind of
and not even of its former self, because I'm sure when you mention the former self, you're comparing it to the Final Five.
Yes, that's true.
This tournament would never. I mean, it's almost become a shell of the Frozen Faceoff, because I was looking at past numbers, attendance wise. It's probably fair to say that COVID contributed to its demise, because the last time pre-COVID, the last tournament at the X would have been that 2019 season with that double overtime game with St. Cloud and Duluth title game. Looking at those numbers, actually the first year of the NCHC at the Target Center, the 2014 final face-off, that was sub 10,000. But you remember too, that was North Dakota, but then Miami, Western, and Denver. Maybe the 3, other than North Dakota, like the 3 worst teams you could imagine there for attendance purposes to make the Target Center. And I think there was maybe some still resentment towards the fact that the Frozen or the Final Five had been killed. And it's like, I don't like screw the new one. I don't know why we killed the old one.
Also,
but then after that, starting with the second year in 2015, you had 11,000 and change for each of the final games. And then too, another factor, I don't know if this makes any difference, but through 2019, you still had a third place game as well. So you're still doing 2 games a night. But you had 11,000. It's just 2 sessions. So it's not butts and seats. It's just total tickets sold.
Yep.
So prior to the 2020s, the championship game always was in 5 figures other than that first year. But then since then, the 3 that have been taking place since COVID, after the COVID years, the one that didn't have a tournament and then the Grand Forks year, they haven't made it to 10,000. I don't think in any session. It might have been one with North Dakota, but this one was last year. The title game was 6,000 and change. Same thing with this year. And they've been losing for the total attendance between the 3 sessions. They've been losing about 1,500 from 2022 to 2023 to 2024. So it's like a steady decline. And even this year, you had St. Cloud and North Dakota in it. It's not like it's Miami and CC and Denver all made it. Like you had some two local teams in there, but it's just continuing to dwindle. And then you put it up against, you tune in if you saw any of the Bemidji game, or you flipped it on to watch the Michigan State-Michigan Big Ten title game. Or even I was checking out the RIT AIC Atlantic Hockey game. Those are all on-campus championship games, and they were packed to the gills, and the home fans were going nuts, especially in the RIT and Michigan State cases where those teams won those games. It doesn't hold a candle in terms of atmosphere to those. So I don't know. I'd like to look at Hockey East and ECAC. I mean, I watched the ECAC title game, and I think Cornell fans showed up and decent crowd. The thing with those conference tournaments, which are still being unchanged for the time being, they're still going to be neutral sites. ECAC just announced that they're going to continue going to Lake Placid for the next couple of years. The difference between those leagues and like the NCHC is those leagues were generally unchanged by realignment 10 years ago. And with like Hockey East cases, you've got how many teams within a stone's throw of Boston who can always make it there. So, I mean, the factors that led to the NCHC replacing the Final Five, I think it was kind of doomed from the start, but now we're kind of seeing the bottom fall out the last couple of years post-COVID. And if this year was bad, I wouldn't imagine next year is going to be a much better.
Nope. Everybody come out.
Perhaps it is going to be. Maybe they'll get a last time of the last dance kind of bump.
It will be. It will be our my dad and I's 25th year. So
25th and final.
Yeah, exactly. So, but
yeah, because I saw that it seemed like the biggest thrill there on Saturday was the drunk guy that passed out, and people were stacking stuff on his head.
Oh yeah, that was the highlight of the weekend. Yeah, a guy just sitting there, passed out, put a popcorn bucket in, just stacked beers. It got to 6 high before it collapsed. I didn't know. Did you get a text about it from someone in the arena, or I can't imagine they put that on CBS Sports.
No.
Okay.
Championship game, and then like that after that, and the Sunday is like the one time a year I allow myself to look at Twitter.
Okay,
so
fair enough.
That's how I found that out.
Yeah, stacked up. And then I collapsed. But then about a couple minutes later, he woke up. And
so that didn't cause the collapse.
No.
I thought that
it was just an imbalance of the structure. I think he just got to like a terminal height, and it stood up there. Yeah, it was like 5 seconds, and then everybody was cheering, and maybe that caused like a disturbance in the frequency of the sound waves that caused everything to kind of tumble. But yeah, even with all those cans falling around him, just unfazed, unchanged. He ended up being on the scoreboard. So they did put him in the arena scoreboard of him just laying out there. And then I would say a little bit later, he woke up. And there was just a random roar of the crowd. You probably heard it on TV, but just a random roar of the crowd, and everyone was happy that he woke up and cheering him. And then he was put on the big screen. And then as he was put on the big screen, the DJ played "Wake Me Up" by Avicii, which was just A+. 10 out of 10 no notes for the in-game crew. It does remind me of my favorite. One of my favorite. I mean, I've got quite a few memories when it comes to this event, but there was one year back in the final 5 days where a guy passed out, and it was I think it was a North Dakota fan who was passed out. And that year, Fleet Farm had like make your own signs. So you could, go get supplies. You can make your own sign, Huskies #1, blah, blah, blah. Someone ran up there, made a sign, and made like a little thought bubble. And the sign that he put in the thought bubble was "My liver hurts."
Very nice.
and like held it up.
No, good.
So like all these people were taking pictures, and they were all on their Motorola flip phone at that point, because it wasn't. I don't think a lot of people had the iPhone at that time.
That's good. It's good, clean, drunken fun.
Just exactly. That's what we're gonna miss about the event. So, Denver ends up winning, gets the auto bid. I listened to your previews and predictions, and I looked at everybody else's comparisons, and I was like, you guys are all wrong. Andrew's got the bracket already. So it's nice to see
one person of the commentariat agreed with me. And that was Us Cho, which is fitting that I jive with Us Cho, but neither of the CHN poobahs agreed with me. I didn't see. I don't look at theirs before I record because I don't want to be tainted. But I think it was McMahon who seemed to be like
in your podcast. You almost had like a little bit of a second guess there as you were kind of going through everything. And
my big thing was BU could go to Maryland Heights. They could swap those two first or 1 and 4 seed matchups. The one I really didn't think of, and the one that McMahon was kind of perplexed happened was, and I'm glad I didn't consider this, because when I was talking, I'm like, I'm thinking the committee will try to do as close to bracket integrity with maybe a tweak, like one tweak.
We need a bracket integrity sounder. I don't know what it would be,
come up with that,
but maybe like a Frau Blucher type thing with a horse name. I don't know, like something like. Yeah. I mean, I guess we could do like a dun dun dun.
I can work on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the more bracket integral, which I'm not sure if that's the correct adjective, but
I like
it. Run with it.
Let's go with it.
It would have been putting that Maine and Cornell matchup with the 4-13 matchup, the Michigan State Western Michigan matchup, and then hence have that in Maryland Heights. I never considered that because I'm like, you got Maine and Cornell, you're going to keep them out east. Why would you bring 2 Eastern teams west, and then the flip there would have had North Dakota and Michigan in Springfield? Like, why would you send 4 teams collectively across the country rather than keeping those 2 teams on their half of the country, college hockey wise? So I never even considered that. But apparently, like, McMahon has a big bug up his butt about the fact that why didn't they make this move? And I've been seeing this argument where McMahon said this last year too, where he's like, I've been hearing the Manchester Regional, which was last year in New Hampshire, I've been hearing good attendance there. And so you don't need to make as many moves because attendance is going to be fine there. So with Fargo last year too. Well, UND sold that thing out. So we don't need to make any moves there for attendance because we don't got to worry about crowds. And now I see the argument this year is, why did you put Michigan, North Dakota, and Michigan State all in Maryland Heights? Because they're going to pack a $2,500 or 2,500 seat venue. Have any of us seen these regionals lately? Let's have that problem of having too small a venue. And my it's same as last year with the Fargo, with 3 Minnesota teams in Fargo. I find that in the 3 Michigan teams in Maryland Heights this year, I find that to be a feature, not a bug. But there's so many people on Twitter that are like appalled the fact that they would load that region up with 3 Michigan teams. Like, that's part of the fun. Don't tell me that you really think that. And I think part of the rationale was, let's put Maine and Cornell in the Maryland Heights because that way there won't be a flood of the market for tickets for the Maryland Heights regional with North Dakota and Michigan there as well. So it's almost like it's a perverse argument because we've been bitching and moaning about a regional attendance. We finally have a scenario where we could have really good attendance, like where demand outstrips supply. But that's like a mistake now. We'd rather put Maine and Cornell in Maryland Heights because we don't want to overpack a building in St. Louis. Like, let's be consistent at least with our complaining. I get the argument of, why are we having the regional at all in Maryland Heights at an NHL practice facility? We knew that 3 years ago or wherever it was.
Yeah.
I've always thought that was a really stupid idea, but because we have it, and there is no host regional, and we have a host in Springfield, we have a host in the field in Sioux Falls, but this is a Lindenwood regional in a sort of island in college hockey world. We should kind of try to pack that with name brands there, because who else is going to fill that place up other than a couple of key, well-traveling fan bases? that's like the most intriguing regional for me. And I love those two games in that first round. And conversely too, I think that the Springfield regional is kind of maximized too with having Maine and Cornell there. Again, like I get the argument of bracket integrity, but less so because it is the margins are so small. Like for instance, North Dakota actually does have a higher RPI than Maine does. So trying to fit it in with, well, they were the 6th seed and we're already screwing it with one's flip with Michigan and Omaha having to be flip-flopped because of trying to avoid an interconference rivalry in the first round. Again, we're just kind of stretching muscles for no reason here in order to satisfy. I mean, from the perspective of everybody's angry again and that the groundswell to go back to campus sites, especially in light of, like I said, very well attended and very good atmosphere created conference tournament finals that we saw on Saturday. The more momentum we have to get to that point, I'm for the anger in that case. But a lot of this strikes me as angry for no good reason. And I think that, again, we should try to make compelling matchups. And I think that both Springfield and Maryland Heights were enhanced by the fact that you could keep teams closer to where they are. And it does kind of it doesn't do too much to dissatisfy the strict bracket integrity crowd either, because we're not really moving mountains to maintain those matchups and place them in those regionals. I don't know. Mm-hmm. Rant over, I guess, but
well, I mean, you're talking about like bracket integrity and all that, and it's like, well, I thought the big argument about not going to campus sites is that the pairwise is an imperfect system, and how, using the pairwise should be good enough to judge the field, but not good enough to actually rank 116, 215, and like 8, 9. It's too big of a swing for, and it's like, oh, okay, but you want to switch around those regionals to kind of keep your bracket integrity that is putting that much pressure on the pairwise anyway? It's like, again, consistent. Pick a lane. Which one do you want to do? Defend it. That's fine, but pick one. And that's the same, like, consistency when it comes to complaining about attendance. Like, we've had Allentown for how many years that has only drawn about 2,500. So you book a 2,500 seat arena, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, why are we booking a 2,500 seat regional? And it's just like, pick a lane, pick an argument, guys. Sorry that it's not working out.
Yeah, and I don't know what kind of sources McMahon has. I know he likes to think that he's got great sources because he charges $70 for some Substack newsletter.
Every once in a while he'll tweet out, and I'm like, ooh, that might be kind of interesting. And then
I have been I have the free subscription, so I just get the little nuggets, the little teasers. And there's been times I've actually clicked on it, I'm like, I'll dump the $50. But then the last time I did that, it's $70 for the year. Something about that $20, man. I'm just like, I don't know. I'll pass. But who's ever feeding him his scoops? Why should we trust those scoops when he says, don't worry about attendance in that regional because they're selling good? Like the Manchester one that he said last year, it's a 9,000, it's a little bit under 10,000 capacity for hockey in that arena. They got 3,600 in the first round matchups with BU versus Western Michigan. They got double that for the regional final with BU and Cornell. But still, that's 7,200 in a 96 or so 100 seat facility. It's still about 3/4 full. And we're using that as like proof of that's a good one. That one was not a complete flop. Now we have an opportunity to, maybe talk the St. Louis Fire Marshal into adding another 500 into that practice facility in Maryland Heights. And that's like a travesty. Mm-hmm. Like, let's see the 3,000 first. And then if it is something where we would love the fact that see if 1,000 people in the parking lot tuning into the game because they can't get in. That'd be great for college hockey. This is not a problem that we have ever had, ever. And so I think the smart thing is to load that up with name brands, because it's still like, if I know that there's Michigan and Michigan State fans that are all across the country, and there's probably a good contingent of them in the St. Louis area. Same with North Dakota. But for the most part, the people that are going to be traveling to that regional are going to be traveling, meaning a couple of hours, a windshield time to drive to that regional on 4 days' notice or whatever it is. That in and of itself shrinks your available market. And so let's see it before we already pronounce this to be a giant embarrassment for the sport. And if it is something where there's 5,000 fans there in a 3,000 seat arena, awesome. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. And we probably will not have Maryland Heights host a regional again. But I don't feel like, I feel like that's a good problem to have rather than the issues of, well, like how the X looked on Saturday with majority empty seats there. That's the more troubling problem. Maybe we find that 3,000 seater. We get like the Wodens who say that this is the reason that we can't go to on-campus regionals because Union has a small rink and they can't possibly host a regional on short notice with their small rink. If they can cobble together a Michigan or a Maryland Heights regional, getting 3,000 fans in a 2,500 capacity arena on 4 days notice after reviewing the bracket, maybe that tells us that we should even go smaller if we're going to continue this failed experiment of trying to get regional or neutral site regionals. Let's just see it. It's at least something different, but I feel like they did as much to maximize that regional there, and it would have been much less maximization of attendance had you had Michigan State, Western Michigan, Maine, and Cornell there. You know what I'm saying? Like, the fire marshal's not getting it asked about capacity with that 4 teams. So in that case, I thought the committee did the right thing. Obviously, I think that because that's what I picked. But yeah, some of the argumentation is a little precious, but it's a yearly tradition, and in that sense, I kind of look forward to it. And the whole thing about there is an inherent problem with having 3 Michigan schools in a 4-team regional. That's what I kind of want. Am I wrong there? Do you feel like that's a problem?
Well, and I don't think it's a problem. I mean, I think, like you said, when you were talking about, you kind of sold me on it when you were talking about how that's like a mini GLI, kind of aspect. You got you got some rivalries there, and you got kind of some spice when it comes to it. So I guess I never really looked at that as like, oh, that's too many. And yeah, I guess it's like when they were talking about how Minnesota, getting 3 teams in the Sioux Falls or in Fargo last year. And even looking at that, I was just like, yeah, but it's 3 different conferences. I mean, eventually that's
right,
what you're going to have when everything is broken up into different conferences. And it's like, I want to beat these teams like that even gives more like fuel for, knocking them out, is when, the next time you play them in non-conference match, it like you have a little bit of an extra storyline and panache to it. And I think that's fine. It's the people who want to thump their chest about we are the state of hockey. And it's like, first off, cool it with that. That's literally a marketing term by the Minnesota Wild. Like nothing more than that. But also it's like you want to just express your weird big D energy when it comes to, well, we're the best, we're going to show it, but they want to put down Minnesota hockey by putting them all in the same regional. And that's not fair. And it's just like,
I think that is part of it, because they think that this is like a cannibalization plot, that we can't have too many Michigan teams in the Frozen Four. Again, I don't think that's the point. I think the point is for them to make a sexy regional. You got 3 out of 4 teams in a regional. Why don't you celebrate that rather than, that cuts out our chances of having a 4-team Michigan regional.
And the other aspect of that is then, okay, you're going to tick off one fan base by having them leave somewhere else. I thought last regional worked out great, and I think this regional works out great. Now, obviously, Maryland Heights is a little bit of a different drive than, Fargo was for the Minnesota fans. Minnesota State all those fans. But at the same time, it's I don't know. I like how kind of that bracket, and I kind of liked how it shaked up, and I don't get that argument. And
then I saw some people like, well, they set the precedent last year when they screwed over the 3 Minnesota teams and put them all in one regional. What you're forgetting 2018 when they did the same damn thing in Sioux Falls with St. Cloud as the 1 seed, and they've also put Mankato and Duluth there as the 2-3 matchup, and then with Air Force infamously as the 4th team. We all know what happened there. This is not new. It was not the first time that happened. Last year was not the first time they put 3 Minnesota teams in the same regional. Like, do we have that short of a memory span that we can't remember that this happened just in very recent history? And again, I think it's part of the allure of that regional is that flavor of it. And yeah, similar with the Springfield regional. I mean, that's, I guess, the other aspect, which is, as far as true outrage, I'm not even sure outrage is, because a lot of people are, if that's maybe even the more common outrage was Denver's got to play at Springfield versus UMass. And similar to how I said about the Gophers last year, getting the quote unquote region of death with the St. Cloud Mankato matchup in the other game, I don't really think Denver needs to be scared about UMass. I was saying last week, they're the frauds. They're the Omaha of the East. They're the worst at-large team in this field, which obviously isn't going out of a limb. I would probably put RIT ahead of UMass in terms of overall talent. If Denver is mopping the floor with St. Cloud and beating Omaha handily in the championship game, I think they're going to win that game by 3. I don't care if that is on UMass's campus, which it's not. It's like a half an hour away drive. So that part, I don't think that they should be shaking in their boots about UMass. But the look of a 4 seed getting a close to home ice advantage over a 1 seed, and similarly Omaha as a 3 seed hosting a regional, albeit in a different state, against Minnesota. We've got 2 host schools of these regionals make the tournament. They're both underdogs, like the lower seed in the first round matchup. How many times do we have to see this? Like, Providence has a national championship banner in large part because of this. And so the more that this happens, the more that I think that fuels resentment. And I do think that is legit. A legit concern and a legit beef and a legit argument, another one, to go back to campus. And the fact that, I think Woden, someone brought this up, the irony of David Carl doing a media tour this year, basically representing the let's go back to campus faction, him being the one to, his team being the one to be on the losing end of I've got to play a lower seed in a host regional, is kind of, I bet, a little bit of a salt in the wound kind of thing. But the more that people do cry foul about that, the better. And certainly this is part of, if not the most egregious aspect of the current broken system, I think it's this. Although, like I said, I should say I don't think Denver should be too scared about UMass.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I totally agree. Because I think after, when kind of looking at it and how everything kind of shaked out in the bracket, I think Denver has arguably the easiest route. Maybe.
I don't think. I think the Maine Cornell matchup will be tough.
I think that'll be intriguing. I think Cornell, how they were on the outside until the last couple of games. And then they were able to launch into pairwise position.
I don't like Cornell. They're just a tough team to play. They're a tough team to beat in the tournament. They're not going to be fun to play against. Coach is a dickhead. That's just going to be annoying. I think they're going to beat Maine. But I think Denver is the second best team in the field. So having them go out to Springfield, I don't think will derail them, at least to making the Frozen Four. Keep in mind, too, that Denver will be hosting a regional next year at Loveland, and they've hosted one before. It's not like they're never getting home ice advantage in the regionals either. So they've been, they said, we've always got to travel west or travel east in regional time. Let's beat them at our own game. Let's put in a bid. And they did. And they've done that several times.
Is there a rule that like the same site can't host 2 years in a row? Like
that I'm not sure.
I don't understand. Like,
no, because Allentown did it 2 years in a row.
Okay.
22 and 23.
Because obviously
Fargo's done back to backs.
I mean, at least now it's just hopping back and forth between Fargo and Sioux Falls, and it's going.
Well, I know
to be
Loveland did
as well.
Loveland did 21 and 22, and then they're going to be doing it next year as well. Because they did it the last time Omaha and Denver, so that was the year that St. Cloud made it to the title game, and Denver did not make the tournament. Omaha made it over them, and then Omaha got smoked by the Gophers.
Got smoked, yeah.
That was in Loveland, but that was a year where they weren't really using the pairwise.
Which
people were thinking Denver was getting hosed, even though they were below 500 that year. But Omaha made it so they didn't make their own hosted regional one of those years. But in 22, they made it and they won the whole thing that year. So,
do you think Omaha gets smoked by the Gophers again?
No. I don't know if we want to go into predictions, or we'll kind of touch on each of these regionals, but
I don't know.
I
just you said that, and I'm like, oh well, they are playing, so
it's a good transition because I can bring up my Caesars betting app, which I had to dust off because I haven't laid a bet in a good 4 to 6 months because I'm not very good at betting, as it turns out.
Okay.
And I did this. I found this out with the Twins. Me being an anti-Twins fan, we're in baseball season is starting this week, so
God, don't get me started.
This is completely off topic.
The Twins have been how many injuries
that.
and whatnot.
Because I started last year, which is like the first time that I really did sports betting. But I'm like, oh, let's bet against the Twins. I hate the Twins, and then I'd lose all those bets. And so then I started being like, well, no, I should bet for the Twins because if the Twins lose,
you're happy.
That's great. I'm happy. If the Twins win, I'm sad, but at least I won $10. So it's a little bit of a softening of the wound. So now Caesars doesn't really offer a ton for NCAA tournament games, but they do have futures for the NCAA tournament. Omaha at plus 3,300.
Oh,
33 to 1. I put $20 on Omaha.
Oh my God.
And so, because I really do have a 2018 Duluth, like pre-PTSD feeling about them. And the way that the ball's rolling, you're saying that, do you think that they're going to get smoked by the Gophers? No, this is how it's going to happen. I'm thinking it's going to be like an old time disease, like typhoid fever, I'm going to say, runs through the Gopher locker room. And Snuggerud's out, Justin Close is out, Oliver Moore's out. They all are stricken by the bug, and Omaha wins. And then I'm thinking RIT beats BU, potentially for typhoid fever purposes. Maybe that's spread over to BU. I don't know. But similar to the only other time that Omaha's won games in the tournament, who did they beat in that regional final in 2015? RIT, old friend, RIT. So I think they're going to beat the Gophers, decimated by disease and illness, and then they will beat RIT in the regional final. So I got Omaha coming out of the Sioux Falls regional. Who do you got out of that regional?
I just see this is the regional that it like intrigues me the least.
I can see that.
So I am kind of curious on how RIT is, and how they play. So I'm actually kind of,
got a good goalie.
Yeah, so I'd like to see them go ahead and take the regional. I think that would be fun.
You're going to pick RIT?
No, I think I'm going to pick. I'm going to pick BU. But it boils down to I don't trust Minnesota or Omaha.
Well, who's winning that first round game between those two? Omaha or the Gophers?
The Gophers are.
Gophers are going to win that game.
Yep.
Okay, and then you're going to take BU. All right. So then, how about that region of death? Maryland Heights, the GLI.
The GLIND. It's this is going to be an intriguing one. I don't know. I really don't know Michigan State that well. I just kind of looked at them kind of throughout the past and kind of saw them having kind of a little cute story going on. I really don't think Western Michigan is that good. I mean, to be honest, I think that's a weak team overall. So I'm
weak team.
Yeah.
Fight words there. What, 4 guys with 40 plus points?
Yeah. And then that's it.
And they're going to be playing at Lindenwood site. They're very familiar with Lindenwood. So they're it's the only team there
they
this
know
year.
All the hot spots. They know all the restaurants.
They know the rink. They know the bounces on the boards. This is perhaps a big advantage here for Western.
Oh, geez. I didn't even think about that. The home ice of Western has for how many games that they played against Lindenwood there. So
4 games. They played more games against Lindenwood than they played against UND this year.
So I'm going with Michigan on this one. Michigan proper.
I have them too winning this regional. I think Michigan State's going to beat Western in that first round game. Although I think it'll be a game. I like you. I'm not completely sold on Michigan State, but I think they're definitely good. But something about Michigan, I think they kind of outplayed Michigan State in that title game. They got 1 goal waved off, which I thought was kind of a dicey call, and then Michigan State got a goal counted on a review. The Michigan coach was having a heart attack on the bench during that game. So I think that it was a little fortunate for Michigan State to win that game in overtime. With really, again, not a ton on that line, except for the big stakes of the rivalry there with the 2 big schools there in Michigan. It was definitely a nice, intense atmosphere there. And I enjoyed keeping an eye on that one, kind of alongside the Denver-Omaha, as you called it, kind of snoozer. So, but yeah, for some reason, I like Michigan out of this game. I mean, we're not even sure. We saw that Hedquist play for North Dakota against Omaha. He played all their playoff games for them so far. Barry seems to think that person's going to be ready to go, but it'll be a cold person, if that, and a cold person who still has a .906 save percentage or whatever it is. Like, it's not like he's getting 98 Hasek back from the dead here. So I think UND is going to have their hands full with Michigan, and I think Michigan is going to win that regional. But with that, Michigan, have they played a game? Because there was that meme. Was it one of the Frozen Fours at the X where it's the UND fan was flicking off the Michigan guy, the Michigan player? I feel like I've seen that meme before. Was that? Did they play? Who played in that 2011 Frozen Four that Duluth won their first one? I know they beat Michigan in the title game. Was UND? Did UND and Michigan play in that first game in that Frozen Four? Because I want to feel like that is the origin of that.
I think so. Yeah,
I think that's the origin of that. I think Michigan scored a goal, and then the North Dakota fan flicked them off. And someone took a picture of it or a screenshot of the ESPN feed. And I think that has lived in at least infamy in my head. The way that you're being silent seems to think that you don't get this reference. But
I think I remember the picture. So,
but I can't remember if they played. I mean, they seem to play a lot in Frozen Fours or tournament settings before. But I'm wondering if they've played since then, if there's been another postseason matchup with them or not. But 2 teams with a lot of history and going at it again here in a town in Maryland or in Missouri that I hadn't heard of until 4 years ago. So that will be novel. But
And sure enough,
So we agree there.
West Regional that year, Michigan.
So it was a regional final?
No, but that year, Michigan won the West Regional in St. Louis.
Really?
Yeah. Beat Colorado College, who beat Boston College.
They like smoked
Wow.
BC.
Yeah.
It's not like a 9. Did they put up 9 goals?
No,
on
sadly.
BC?
8? It was 8-4.
Remember that coming out of complete nowhere.
Oh, that's right.
CC
And that's
was
Michigan.
CC the 4 seed?
Michigan beat Omaha in overtime in the first game, and that's when it went to
That was
video review, right?
Yep.
And
controversy there.
Yeah, and they used like
it's like a
camera
kicked-in thing.
They used the across the goal line, but they used the camera on the other side of the rink to determine it was a goal. So
that's right.
Yeah. It was,
what does it say? They weren't playing at the Blues rink, were they? I mean, this still would have been in the era.
Yep, they were at the.
And was CC the 4 seed
at that time? Yep.
Or was Omaha the 4 seed?
CC was the 4 seed. Boston College.
So BC was the 1.
Yep.
Okay. And I think also BC fans, because that was like the one time in Jerry York's tenure that they got sent out west for regional, and of course they lost. And so I think that was a bit of controversy too. That's good that we can have memories of a West Regional 13 years ago on the fly here.
Oh.
But so, and that's probably the last time that they've had a regional in St. Louis. I mean, they're having the Frozen Four there next year, which I think is part of the reason why they wanted this regional to happen, as some sort of, I don't know, priming the pump for the Frozen Four next year. But it'll be a little bit different from when an 18,000 seat arena. Are you looking at that box score?
For which one? No, I was actually looking
regional.
at who. I was going to ask you, who do you think Minnesota Duluth beat in the semifinal?
In the Frozen Four.
Frozen Four.
Who
was the 4th team?
I was going to say Notre Dame, but I think that's the other time they went to the X and won it.
You are
correct.
It
Notre Dame?
Notre Dame.
Okay. So they beat them twice, or they beat them in the title game in 18. And then they would have beaten them in the semifinal in 2011. But if you have that regional, I'm curious what that West Regional attendance number was at.
5,000.
Okay, so would you rather have 5,000 in an 18,000 seat NHL rink, or 5,000 meaning 3,000 in the building and 2,000 angry fans pounding at the doors, trying to burst open the doors at the seams for this regional in Maryland Heights? We're pro chaos on this podcast, so I'm going with the latter.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, so then you thought that was the least, or no, you thought the Sioux Falls was the least compelling regional. Perhaps maybe would you say the Providence is the second least compelling? BC versus Michigan Tech, and then we've got Wisconsin and Quinnipiac, which I think that game will be tight. I think that'll be a decent game. I'm going to take Quinnipiac in that game. I'm taking Boston College to win the whole thing. Like, honestly,
yeah,
like I've got $20 on Omaha as sort of heart attack insurance for me. But I waxed poetic over the last few weeks about this BC team who, in that Hockey East tournament, beating 2 tournament teams, UMass and BC. BC being the second overall seed, beating them by a combined 11 goals in those 2 games. Will Smith, Fresh Prince, up to 67 points on the year. Who I had Gauthier winning the Hobie, and I had Gauthier, Celebrini, and Blake as my Hobie hat trick. Smith's kind of playing himself into the conversation just with that sheer point total. Do you know the last player to have 67 or more points in a season? I'll give you the year, 15-16.
15-16.
And that player had 71 points, and he did not win the Hobie. It was the year that Jimmy Vesey won Hobie.
Vesey won that year?
And much like Dewey defeats Truman, somewhere in a phone memory chip that I probably don't have anymore, I have a screenshot of CHN saying this player won the Hobie and not Jimmy Vesey. They erroneously ran it until they changed it like 5 minutes later.
Interesting.
He is an NHL star currently. Plays in the same division that the Wild do.
I can't believe I'm blanking on this.
He played at Michigan. Just a 1-year wonder.
Oh,
for Michigan.
God, I remember that controversy. Yeah.
It's on the tip of your tongue.
Yeah, it is. What's his name?
Kyle
Connor. God, that annoys me that I didn't get that.
So it's been a good 8 years since someone's even, and Smith still got games to play here. He could certainly surpass 71 points. 71 points is also what Eichel got the year before that, 2015, when he did win the Hobie. I was just looking at like top scorers the last 10, 15 years or so. I mean, I think 71 points was the high watermark going back 20 years. But some years it's like it's some weird guy I never had heard of. Like there was a Brian Leach. Not that Brian Leach, but some guy named Brian Leach that played with Quinnipiac. He was at Quinnipiac's. He led the nation in scoring in 2009, I think it was. Like some of these years. Remember, like LeBlanc when he won Hobie, and his point total was like 53 or so, and it stands out as one of the lower point totals for a Hobie winner. But he was like 7th in the country that year at 53 points. A lot of times like 60 points will be the nationwide leader. The year that Patrick Newell, his best year for the Huskies, I think he was 4th in the country in scoring, and I think he just had like 50. There's been some years where there's just not a Gaudreau, I should mention. He had an 80-point year the year that he won his Hobie, which is the year after LeBlanc. That's the high watermark for like the last 15 years. But most of the time, it's in the leading scorer will be more in the 50s rather than the 60s. And like I said, this is the first time in a while that someone's gotten up to 67. So he had four goals in the title game. Will Smith did against BC. He's only had 3 games this year where he's been shut out of points. So he's on quite a heater along with the rest of that team. So who do you got winning that Wisconsin? I mean, you got BC over Michigan Tech.
Yeah, I got. It might be boring. I've got BC winning the whole thing. I think they're far and away the best team. But it's one of those things that's like this. I think this is going to be a year where the best team doesn't win,
which is it's probably the exception to the rule is when the best team wins.
Yeah.
I feel like BC is on a different level. If they do lose, it's going to be a SCSU kind of thing where they beat themselves and play into a lesser team's trap type of game.
Yeah.
Don't see it happening against Michigan Tech.
Nope.
Who do you got against? Who do you have them beating in the regional final? Wisconsin. They're well rested. They'll have 2 weeks off prior to playing Quinnipiac.
Well, rest versus rust. I'm leaning a little bit more towards Quinnipiac. I think what can I say? Like the surprise of Wisconsin, I think they've kind of faded out a little bit towards the end, and I think they're going to take the L in this one. So I got Quinnipiac winning that game.
I think that will be a good game. And I think that the regional final would be it just because BC is so stacked. I feel like it'd be the one if they don't win the regional, I'd be fairly shocked. And because of that, it's lesser on my interest gauge of the regionals. And then what about that last one? I guess we've got Springfield with Denver. Seems like you were with me that they shouldn't be scared about UMass. What about Maine and Cornell? I said I had Cornell winning that.
I've
then
got
Denver
Maine
coming out of that region.
winning that, but
Maine,
I think that's
okay.
a lot of my maybe I guess nostalgia or like I don't know. I just like it when Maine is good. Like just as a college hockey fan and just the history and their jerseys and it's like I don't know. It's just
I don't think this is a one year
this-
wonder for them. I think that they're gonna be consistently good. These Nadeau
Right.
brothers, or Nadeau, two of them, they're the two leading scorers, freshmen. I mean, they're going to maybe not be there 4 years, but I think they're going to be there next year. And yeah, I think the Bar's got a good thing going there. So I don't think this is just going to be like a Merrimack from last year where it's just we'll make it and then we'll return to irrelevance. I think Maine's back in a consistent basis, but yeah, for some reason I've got Cornell beating them, but I've got Denver toppling Cornell in the regional final. Do you have Denver or Maine in your regional final?
Denver.
Denver coming back to the X.
Like all honesty, in your opinion, how many teams could win the national title? Or how many teams this year do you think deserve to win the national title?
Deserve is kind of a loaded term. What do you mean by that?
Okay, like I don't know. When I look at this, like how many teams do you think are just above and beyond better than the field? Like I look at this and I can really only see maybe 3 teams winning it, maybe 4.
I would
like everybody else is just there
BC,
for window dressing.
BC, Denver, and I'm jokingly kind of taking RIT to beat BU, but BU's probably the 3rd best team in the country. I don't see Michigan State winning it. None of the 2 seeds. I think the 4 seeds are pretty weak.
Which makes me think we're probably not going to get BC Denver, but God, I want to watch that game.
It'd be a great game.
I think that would be just so much fun to watch.
I don't know if it's boring to root for chalk. I just want the best possible matchup. I mean, I didn't think the women's championship game was like the best game ever played, but at least we got the 2 clearest best teams in the country.
Yep,
playing for it all. Similar to the men's side. It just would take a bit of a sting if it's Omaha and Maine in the title game. It might be a great game. Like I'm saying, like Maine and Cornell, I don't think is going to be like the best matchup. It doesn't look like it's the most intriguing matchup on paper. Who knows? That might be the best game of the whole tournament. That's kind of the beauty of hockey in general. So you never know which kind of game you're going to get on any given day. But for some reason, I like legitimate champions. I don't like looking back and circling Providence in 2015 and Yale in 2013, and Duluth in 2018 and Duluth in 2019 and Duluth in 2011. I don't like circling illegitimate champs. So it makes me go to bed easier if I'm like, okay, it makes sense. BC won the tournament. Like they deserved it. So
I agree. So do you think, kind of looking at the women's hockey tournament and the games, like you said, they all went chalk. I watched the Ohio State-Wisconsin game. Ohio State ends up being the victor, 1-0, which was the same score that Wisconsin beat Ohio State the year before, 1-0. So a little, again, poetry, so you can say there. It's just kind of my thoughts on the game. I was expecting maybe a little bit more fireworks. It was obviously 1-0. You're not getting a lot of scoring, but overall, I guess I expected maybe a little bit more.
Well, I think that it's kind of a flaw, but with women's hockey, games of like big games like this between 2 evenly matched teams, I think we can agree. I've been saying like Ohio State's a little better. You've been arguing the opposite with Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. I think we can agree they're both in that realm of elite. And it's a very exclusive class in women's hockey. Like, it's really just those two, because we see like the results with Ohio State against teams like Minnesota, or even the game against Clarkson was tight. They ended up pulling away, but they beat Duluth, a tournament team, by 9 in the regional final, And so, but when you have games against two evenly matched teams with a lot on the line, it's hard to bet against anything other than 1-0 or 2-1, because there's just going to be chess games, feeling each other out, and not wanting to make the first mistake, because you feel like you almost want a team to make a mistake, because then the floodgates can open. Instead of a 1-0 game, that turns into a 4-3 game, which is just inherently a little bit more exciting. But we saw this. We look at most of the games with St. Cloud and Duluth this year. Two teams, again, very, very similar in build and makeup. Those games were the last series in Duluth that year was it 1 goal scored in 6 periods of hockey plus overtime. These are kind of the games you see more frequently in the playoffs and in crunch time against evenly matched teams, where, I do agree that I wish there was a little bit more back and forth there, but it was certainly not without chances and not without drama. And so, I mean, I'm glad I won our bet, because I had Ohio State, and so I'll take a victory lap there. I guess maybe the bigger shocker of the weekend, we talked about it too, Izzy Daniel winning the Patty Caz, which definitely surprised me, because I don't even think she was the ECAC's best player, but seems clear that O'Brien and Sims canceled each other out on their vote, which led to Daniel being able to snag the top prize. But that might have been the bigger surprise of the weekend, because we were just kind of assuming it was going to be one of the Wisconsin players, and most likely Sims, who won the WCHA Player of the Year honors. So that'll be a good trivia question. Who's Izzy Daniel, and who did she beat out? It's going to be like a Kyle Connor kind of situation, where, that's right, Sims didn't win the Hobie or the Patty Caz. So yeah, that was definitely a surprise, but fitting way to end the women's season. 2 best teams going at it for the Natty on the line, and congrats to the Buckeyes.
Yep, exactly. So, keeping in the same vein, there was Dan Jacobson actually ran into JoJo at the X, and actually gave us a hot scoop that JoJo will be back for a 5th year. So
wow.
So thank you for the Minnesota Duluth fan for
crackerjack reporting there.
Right? No kidding. Way more reporting.
Isn't that great too? Isn't that great too? That I think we're kind of getting to Dan Jacobson. I think he's coming to the dark side.
I think so too.
He's going up to St. Cloud players and he's getting scoops.
Yeah,
like there's always room. Dan,
junior correspondent Dan Jacobson. So that's. I
almost feel
put him on the payroll.
I just feel bad for JoJo. It's like, why did she give him that scoop? There must be something there as far as there's a backstory. Maybe they, because she's got Duluth ties too.
Yeah. Well, so Dan said that he just yelled JoJo, who looked, waved, and then walked over to him, and he was like,
"Does that mean that he watches Dump and Change? Like, why would Dan Jacobson know what JoJo Chobak looks like?"
He watches the vlogs. He thinks the vlogs are just wonderful, because they are. He says he doesn't watch like the podcast because it's about people he doesn't care about. I mean, he says that. I don't know if that's the case now.
He doesn't mean it.
But he says, he watches the vlogs, and he finds them really interesting on what, how players spend, and what they do between games, between practices, and all that. So apparently, I'm like Dan even kind of admitted I don't exactly know what I say because I was pretty drunk, but she was really nice, and so I just kind of blurted it out. You coming back for a 5th year? And she said yes.
Well, we'll stick Dan to that standard. If we
going forward
hear otherwise, you know who to blame.
Yep. He said it is really weird being, late mid-30s, just calling out the name of a 20-some-year-old and being just a little bit of a weird
creepy
factor.
At all.
No. Especially when Dan Jacobson was wearing a cow outfit too. So.
Oh, because they were Mavericks.
They were Mavericks
this weekend.
Yep, exactly.
I thought you were just saying he was wearing cow outfit just for the hell of it, which would be even better.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
It's great.
So, I actually have to double check. So, anyway, yeah, real big Omaha fan.
Well, that's big news.
Yeah.
Can he? Maybe he can do some recon and see what Ahola is up to.
Yeah.
Now that he's gotten in
now
with
that you've
Showback,
gotten in with JoJo,
maybe you could
let's keep it rolling here.
Continue the digging here. Let's see if we can scoop the entire roster here.
So, as far as St. Cloud State, everything when it comes to, what we think is going to happen with this offseason, we'll be here with news breaks. It sounds like I said, Bassie in the portal, so he's going to be somewhere else. That's okay.
Presumably.
Yeah. It sounds like Peart, you'll probably wake up, listen to the podcast, and already know that he did sign with the Wild. Looks like that is imminent. Just looking, I thought he really regressed this season, so I guess I'm not too surprised, or I guess I'm a little surprised that they're really want to try to keep his rights. So I guess they want to develop under their wing in Iowa.
Again,
so.
is it some is it after 3 years that your rights become you got to sign them after the 3rd year, or they'll become a free agent after the 4th year? Is there an incentive for NHL teams to try to sign guys after their 3rd year?
Yes.
Rather than trying to wait.
Yeah.
So perhaps that factored into this.
And that could be it. And that's why it's kind of interesting that Bassie's in the portal, because not only would it said his 4th year, but it would be his 5th year. And he is owned by Chicago, who doesn't seem any too interested in signing.
Can you really blame him?
And no, not really. But yeah, so what happens is that if you go to that 4th year, and then basically after that season ends, I believe you have about 30 days to sign.
This is what happens with that VC. It happened exactly with him after he won the Hobie. It's actually, the rule is named after Bobby Geffert, who was the first player to exploit that way back in the day. But if you ever hear the term the Geffert rule, yes, that is in reference to Bobby Geffert. And it has something to do with this 4th year draft rights kind of issue that we see more and more played out these days. So
yeah. So, I mean, with that, yeah, the Wild want to see what they have. And somebody, granted, he has a 2nd round pick. So, but that does leave a hole there on defense to where
Anhorn obviously as well. Anhorn gone too.
Yep. But I mean, with that, that kind of shows, Leo Gruba, with him not being committed anymore. I mean, that shows kind of a big, I would imagine there's going to be some, we're going to go into the portal here. I think if we're going to go in the portal, this is who we're going to get. We're going to get some type of a tier replacement, at least. And so we've had mixed success with that. I would say Anhorn was a big hit. I would say Carl Falk, maybe a little bit of a swing and a miss.
I think he's been fine. The kind of Falk kind of player, you feel like that's
I feel like a Falk type player would be a little bit better at doing Falk type things, but Falk isn't that good at that. I don't know. It feels I don't have any confidence when he's on the ice that he is not going to give up a goal.
He's like the replacement type of player that you feel like those kind of guys are a dime a dozen available, not only in the portal, but in the NAHL route.
Yeah.
Like if you wanted to bring in a guy, a Carl Falk type, those kind of guys grow on trees. And those guys have value. Like you'd rather have those guys than he's not a defenseman, like Nick Ports, I think was sub replacement level pickup in the portal this year. 2 goals, mostly didn't play all year. That's more of a swing and a miss to me. Whereas Falk still played every game basically. And yeah, I agree he wasn't phenomenal, but is he the main reason that you didn't make the tournament this year? No. But again, I think that type is eminently replaceable. And so who else? I mean, we got Okabe's gone too. He's 5th year, so he gone. Bassey gone. Do we have any other? Molinar gone. Is he a 5th year? Or does he have the possibility of coming back? I guess I could check here.
He has a possibility of coming back.
Okay. Any other grad students? Got Kupka. Kupka gone.
Kupka's gone. Yep.
So just Kupka, Okabe, and Anhorn are the grad students. So they're definitely gone. We know Bassey's already left.
Yep.
But then everybody else has the opportunity to come back.
Viti's kind of the big one.
He's, for a guy like him, he certainly could play somewhere. I mean, maybe not the NHL, but you'd figure at least in Finland is his home country. He could find some work.
And that's
there.
the thing. Would he want to play an extra year with his brother here? Or start his professional career. Now, I don't know exactly if Toronto's the best spot for him. Which is
he'll be a big decision.
Yeah.
And it might depend.
And also, I don't see him as a NHL player. Like you look at the NHL players that have come through the ranks as of late. For St. Cloud, you can tell they have they have a little bit more of an all-around game, I would say, than VT does.
Yeah, and it's never a sure thing with a guy's 5th year. This is the last year, by the way. So VT, his class is the last possible COVID 5th year eligible class of players. So we won't have just one more year of players that could be in his camp or come back for 5th year. In most situations, in any other scenario in college sports history, he would have already been gone. He'd be in the list of players that we're just writing off that are gone. But the fact that his brother is still here, the fact that I don't think Toronto's going to be beating down his door necessarily. He's a weird player in that I think that some people, he gets some criticism, I think even for the 0 penalty minutes. Like there's he's a little bit of soft player, but is he the most all-around player? No. He's definitely not a perfect player, but in my sense, he's a 35-plus point producer the last 2 years. I'm not going to complain if he comes back. And if he does, that certainly helps to set the rest of your roster because we're figuring that Bernovik's coming in. We're figuring that Thorson's coming in. This Kupko, who was a possibility to come in last year, decided to do another year at juniors. He's got to come in this year. He's no longer junior eligible. So if he's a match, he will come in because he can't play juniors. Again, some of these commitments go by the wayside for various reasons. So Bernovik and Thorson, if they don't pull a Gruba, will be coming in. I figure that it looks like Thor Bufflin had a good year of juniors. His stock has improved. And he's going to be 21 in the fall. So you figure that age-wise makes sense for him to come in. But then I do think that they are going to have to be active in the portal. If not, maybe picking up a defenseman. I mean, we saw today, Alaska's top scorer goes in the portal. There's various. I saw Colgate had a 30-point player in the portal that went in the portal a couple of days ago. I mean, I don't think this team, it's like we don't need a 30-plus point player on our lineup. Like, you can always make room for guys like that.
Yeah,
now,
can always.
Whether or not St. Cloud's going to be able to land these kind of players isn't necessarily a foregone conclusion. But I think Larson's going to be in the market just for good talent. It's
Mhm.
not necessarily he's only looking for specific positions. And I wouldn't be surprised, especially considering they don't have, I don't believe, any pipeline goaltenders.
Correct.
If he's active for a goaltender, now that Bassey is officially gone, or at least Bassey's in the portal. Again, there's always a possibility if Bassey could return because no one wants him in the portal and Larson wants him back. I think that possibility is fairly remote at this point. So you got Posh, who at this point seems to be the de facto starter opening night next season. And Gray likely hanging around. We always like Cocaine Bear. Brings good energy.
They edited out that part of the question on.
I haven't seen it yet, but
okay.
I'm looking forward to it.
Well, Avery Myers decided to just say, "What's your goaltending style?" or describe it. I said,
well, they're trying to keep that family rating on Apple, so they had to get rid of that. But I wouldn't be surprised if either maybe a late recruit comes in. I feel like they're going to have 3 goalies on the roster, so but they're in a weird position where they're not necessarily in the market for a starter type. Like they're not going to pull a North Dakota and try to find a person type who's just going to be their main guy. Because I think Posh has earned that right to at least start next year as the main guy. So I don't know if that makes it a more difficult position for them as far as we're only in the market for a non-obvious starting goalie candidate. I don't know. But then if you're only in the market for a third string goalie, you think maybe Gray can be plan B, then you're probably just going to go like the junior route and get a guy like Gray or Posh, who was, NAHL for Posh's case and minor juniors in Gray's case, Canadian juniors in Gray's case. It's probably more likely to just go that route if you're in the market just for a third string type. So that'll be interesting how that shakes out.
Mhm.
But certainly I think a defenseman would be a good bet to get one of those. Some good experience, maybe a solid upgrade from Falk, going a little bit, shooting a little higher this year with that. And yeah, you mentioned it. It's like you go from Anhorn, Crookshank, and a halfway decent Bassey in the 22-23 season, bringing those 3 transfers in to then this year with Falk and Ports.
Yeah.
That's grand slam home run to grounding into a double play. So there, maybe we can just get maybe a base hit this time. Like we don't need the home run, but we don't need the double play either.
All dingers.
Not to mix my metaphors too much here, but
just, spread it all out for you in a nutshell. But we're gonna have a lot of for the off-season podcasts that we'll do. We'll have plenty of theories and thoughts, especially as the portal kind of gets under more and more people.
We've already got action on the women's side too. Our favorite comedian, Devin Millwater. We hardly knew ye.
Yeah. So
she's in the portal. And I think the women's side's I think Adolski's going to be active again. Maybe not as much as he was last offseason, but he'll pick up a couple of transfers.
Find someone who could score.
That would be nice. And I've been
Delmonica.
Seeing that I've been seeing too, even in the portal so far for the women's, because that's been open a little bit longer because their season starts and ends earlier than the men's season does. So they've had more portal entrants than the men's side. And you look at like the players from the CHA or like NUHA, like those lesser leagues, even Hockey East to an extent, players that put up good years on those teams, they kind of use the portal as a springboard to go to either a ECAC or WCHA team. Like be in the market for those players if you can. Like Kiera Zanin for Ohio State came from Penn State. Like a player of that caliber, maybe not that great of a player, but in a situation like that where they're coming from a lesser league, you feel like St. Cloud's in the market now to pick up a player like that, and that could really help them, I think.
Had Mercyhurst captain Sarah Boucher. She's in the portal.
You had texted me that McLeod for Duluth,
Mm-hmm.
one of their goalies, is in the portal. It's kind of like a JoJo situation, I think, where Gascon gets the starts in the playoffs for Duluth, which leads McLeod to say, you know what, F this. Although from her perspective, I was mildly surprised that Ahola got the goalie of the year honors in WCHA, just because it was a split job, and Chobak, I think, even ended up getting more starts than Ahola in the second half.
JoJo earned them, playing a lot better, I thought, in the second half.
But in the same sense, every team in the WCHA did a split goalie tandem. I mean, Ohio State ended up finishing the year with Reagan Kirk in net, winning the national title, and the same with Wisconsin. They rode McNaughton in the playoffs. But during the regular season, those two teams, Thiele was the goalie. They won their first national title, which he was still on the roster, but this Kirk was a transfer for Ohio State. They were splitting weekends all year long. I mean, Minnesota had Sky Vetter at the start of the year, Eddie Vetter's daughter, but she lost the job eventually to Lucy Morgan. They were doing kind of a split tandem as well. For every team going down to St. Thomas with Olivia King, which I saw she was in the portal as well. They were flip-flopping every game. So, I mean, all 8 teams in the conference, there was not a single team that had a goalie play 75% of the games. They were all doing fairly even split. So if that was the case, then Ahola put up as good or better numbers than anyone else in that same situation. So it's not surprising from that. It seems to be the trend, and especially in women's college hockey now, to do a goalie split. So if McLeod's thinking that she's going to get a 90% starting job next year, good luck, because in the West, doesn't seem like that's not really the trend.
That's for sure. So anything else you kind of want to tackle before we hop into questions? We have a couple of questions, and we're at 2 hours ish. So
yeah, I mean, we've got time now that the Huskies season is done. I did do some digging up of receipts from preseason picks. But let's shove that off to next week, because
I don't know if I want to know these.
Yeah, we can. We'll have plenty of time here.
We'll have plenty. Okay, all right.
This isn't
hold that off.
Necessary to do it just this week, so let's push it off to next week.
Let's do that next week then. Yeah. And then we'll talk a little bit about the regionals next week, and then how our picks went.
Let's do that. I like that. Did you go back to do because I did the NCHC standings, pick the standings.
Oh.
And then I did the 2 pick the field episodes. We did one in October and one in January.
Both? Oh, wow. So
I did those.
Went through
but
about
did you
7 hours of content there with those 3 episodes?
And I was gonna be like, I'm just gonna fast forward through all of it. No, I basically listened to the whole episode, at least those segments, because some of it was great. Like you had one with, I think the exact quote was,
"Oh God, don't do it."
I'm reserving judgment on Chris Mayotte. You're like, I'm like, he needs to prove it before we go hog wild and give him Coach of the Year honors. Well, he did just that.
He did that.
So,
and what happened? I thought he was a shoo-in for Coach of the Year, and I'm like, yes, okay, he proved himself. So I am a man of my word.
Well, did you see? I guess we should wrap up that. So Veety lost the Sportsmanship of the Year trophy. What's the guy got to do?
Yeah.
Got to take less penalties?
4 years of 0 penalty minutes, and he doesn't.
They were saying that Darian Goetz from Duluth, who won it, it's just all like this argument of, oh, he did all his charity work, and he helped feed the hungry and clothe the starving and the kids in the community, and blah, 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 blah. But I'm just like, how many penalty minutes did he take this year? And so this is the argument. I mean, we don't need to get off the ice. We don't judge these awards by humanity and being a good person. Come on. This is sports.
Jimmy Carter's the best president ever.
That's right.
If that's the case. So
it's a travesty, but
shafted in the sportsmanship. We should write a letter to the commissioner. Dear Heather, I'll
submit
talk
it
to her at the next
city council or school board.
School board.
She's on school board or city council.
School board.
School board.
Those are
yeah, do that.
Yep.
Do that.
So.
Did you? I mean, we're talking about Mayotte, and we mentioned it earlier. Are you on the CC was royally screwed by the pairwise? Because even Buccigross did you watch the selection show?
Oh God, no. No, the selection show has been absolute garbage for like a decade.
It was pretty bad.
And so I'll see the tweets coming in about how terrible of a show it was. And it's like, yeah, it's every year. Like, just wait. You'll see when the brackets come out and save yourself anything ever. It's just a lot easier that way. I did not watch it. I was not glued to whoever they had, who probably only saw about 4 college games this year that involved only 2 teams. And so it's like I didn't even bother, because I'm like, there's nothing that show would gain from me as a hockey fan. So I was like, no, I'm not gonna. So
it was more just background noise, and I kept it on. Andrew Raycroft, Razor, as Colby Cohen said about 12 times in a 10-minute span. Razor said he pronounces Simon Lacozzi, but it sounded more like Latchkey Kid. Like,
okay.
Wow, yeah. He's like looking at his notes too. You can tell he's never watched a minute of Omaha. Yeah, they're on a big run, and Simon Lachinski is a really good goalie. He's elite.
Wow.
And so there was that. But so then they put a graphic. I was surprised they did this, because it was kind of it was like an actual opinion with substance. It wasn't just, very sanitized kind of blah and nothing. But they put up the side by side with CC and UMass with like the side by side comparison. And the big one is versus top 15 teams. CC was 9-9-1, and UMass was 1-8-2 or something like that. And they kind of made it seem like this is just not fair. And this is the math, though. The pairwise spits out the formula, and it was 0.0003 RPI points difference between those teams. And seeming as if that was the difference between them, UMass making the field, and then to boot, they get to have their host regional. Are you panties in a bunch about that situation and wanting reform of the system as a result?
Do I want reform of the pairwise system? Yes.
In this case,
feel like they got screwed up? But it's like, I'm okay with it, because this was the same system we all agreed on at the beginning of the year. It's not like we tweaked it halfway through. It's not like all of a sudden one team's pairwise just didn't count or anything along those lines, because that's never happened. I obviously say that in jest, as Stonehill was dropped last season, but yeah, but like, I don't know, I'm 100% on board with kind of what you said about end the pairwise at a tie. Just label it as a tie and then do whatever you want for conference points. I think that's actually kind of the perfect ground to have everything on, because I actually went back in every game. So every game I switched to a tie that ended in overtime. So I did that for everyone.
Did you just do that manually, or did you find a way? Wow,
yep.
You got a lot of time in your hands.
Just
busy day at work.
It was really only about 12 minutes or so of scrolling and then click, and then.
Well, what did you do though? Because here's another question about, because I'm wondering about that criteria.
Okay.
Regular season, just doing 60 minutes of 5-on-5. For conference playoffs, we have overtimes there that are 5-on-5 overtimes that are 20 minutes. Like the St. Cloud Denver game at the X. That goes into the books as a full, there's no like overtime 66%, 33% split. That win for Denver on Friday over the Huskies counts the same as a regulation win.
Correct.
So we need to be consistent here, or at least just lay out, is there going to be a difference come conference playoff? Because you can also make the argument that's a little BS too. Why, if you played a 3 overtime game in a conference tournament game and you lose in 3 overtimes, well, if this was a regular season game that we're comparing the rest of the season, that never would have, that again would have been a tie. So do you continue the just 60 minutes and stop it for pairwise even in conference playoff situations where it is a 5-on-5 overtime? Or do you count those just as one game, winner take all? It doesn't matter if you go 7 overtimes.
In my opinion, I think that's easily solved by saying if the rules state that it's 5-on-5 hockey, it counts as a full.
You're just going 5-on-5 pairwise.
Yes.
I could live with that. I could also live with if you just want to take 60-minute pairwise and then treat overtime as extra. But so I don't know if you did that for when you're, because if you're doing it that way, then you shouldn't have like the Omaha or the CC overtime win against Omaha in the playoffs. You shouldn't have counted that as a tie then, because that would have been a playoff overtime win, which we're counting just right now. We're classifying that as 5-on-5, and that's legit to count that as a regulation, as an equivalent to a regulation win. I don't know if that would have made much of a difference because that was just one of their overtime.
That
results.
one, I kept all conference games as wins and losses, or I'm sorry, conference tournament games as wins and losses.
So you counted that as a full win.
I called that as a full win. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
And granted, I did this on the 20th, so I did this on, before.
Yeah. So what was? I guess I'm bearing the lead here. What was the result? Was there a big swing?
I was surprised that Omaha didn't really change.
Really?
And that's the one I thought would have changed the most. But to tie this all into, Colorado College dropped to 18th in the pairwise, which is a staggering drop.
That's weird because, like Omaha, they benefited a lot from overtime wins this year. So you'd think if it was the same, they were in the same boat as Omaha as far as being propped up by a lot of OT wins. Surprised that wasn't a similar dip for Omaha for that, but it's interesting.
But I think that's because you had 2 overtime wins at North Dakota. And then 2 overtime wins at Western Michigan. So I think the home road waiting on that, and then also the overtime, I think just that did quite a bit of lifting, and it flipped a lot of pairwise. So basically, the same reason why, maybe UMass is not great against top competition, and they got in over Colorado College. I also am like Colorado College benefited a lot from being able to win in overtime. I do think that they are a better team. Now, I didn't watch a lot of UMass, so I don't know 100%. But I could say that Colorado College is probably a better team than, I would say, quite a few large teams. I would put them ahead of Western Michigan. I would even put them above Omaha. I think Omaha just kind of got lucky.
Omaha beat them in the season series.
Yeah, but
Western Michigan, they played 4 times. Western beat them twice in regulation, and CC beat them 0 times in regulation. For the head-to-head matchups, the head-to-head matchups would belie your assertion that they were better than those teams.
Well, then I'm looking at then I should have switched over the pairwise rating to the last 10 games or less, something along those lines.
I actually wouldn't mind that not because I overvalue late season, but inherently what that would do is it would lessen the effect of
early season,
which by extension is non-conference games.
True.
Because the majority of the non-conference is early season. So if you're just doing the last 10, that's overvaluing your conference games and your conference tournament performance. I agree with you as far as Western goes. I'm just surprised at how much of a lock they were. Like, when St. Cloud loses, that clinched their, they didn't really even need to sweat it out that much. And looking at their non-conference and the lack of kind of signature wins that they had as well, I'm just a little surprised that they were as good as gold. But yeah, I mean, between CC and UMass, I probably would say that CC is the better team. Just looking at the implications if they were to make it over UMass, you're wondering, because a lot of BU fans are angry that they have to go out to Sioux Falls, because if UMass didn't make it, BU would have played at Springfield. But what would you rather do if you're in UMass's shoes? Would you rather go to South Dakota to play RIT, or would you rather go to Springfield and play CC? I guess I can see the benefits of both. Your fans get to travel, more of your fans get to travel to Springfield. That's a little bit more fun. But I think you play a tougher team in CC than RIT. And again, not to sleep on RIT. I think they're decent, but there's trade-offs of that. So it's interesting, the ripple effects, because then you would have had Denver play in Sioux Falls most likely. They would have been less salty about having to go to Springfield to play UMass. But that's all the butterfly's wings can have lots of different effects. So if it was to you, like there's been some speculation, or it's kind of like, what if there was a committee type, like who wasn't just locked into the pairwise? If a committee humans had to make a decision between CC and UMass for the last at large, would that be a system that you would prefer versus just relying on the computer?
No. I just like having an objective system with its flaws. But we all know the flaws. So it's, I don't know. Like there is some of like the excitement, I guess, or maybe some of the like St. Cloud could have still been in it, and maybe like the committee looks that way, but I don't know. I just feel I don't know. I like,
because they do that in football and they do that in basketball. It's not, ultimately decided by the numbers that the computer spits out.
But I mean, then we would have a whole lot of talking points if Arizona State would have made it. Like, can you imagine those? Be like, are you kidding me?
I think there's the argument of, I think it's healthier from a mental health standpoint to be angry at a human rather than a machine. Like if I yell at the TV, that's weird. That's not normal behavior. If I yell at a human being, like I don't, people tell me that when I get angry in person, it's funny. Like I don't like that. I'm not trying to be funny, but they feel like I'm come off as funny when I'm yelling at someone. People don't laugh and say, that's really funny when you yell at the TV. So it's maybe healthier to be angry, to point your anger at a human rather than a machine. So perhaps it'd be more fun to yell at Jeff Shulman, whoever the chairperson is of the committee, and say, God, you suck. And why? UMass. I will say, though, that considering, so if, let's just say in this alternate reality, they wouldn't come down to, it's just comparing UMass and CC. It would just be like, we'll consider the top 20, and then we'll allot the 4 seeds or the last couple of at-larges to, we'll all kind of consider them under consideration, and we'll hash them out between the committee and have little debates between this team and that team. But like, let's say if it came down to CC and UMass, you're not just giving them the 14th seed or, the 14th spot in pairwise in the last at large. With the UMass thing, you're also weighing, well, then they get a host regional. So then the argument doesn't just become who's the better team. And it's not like they would just say, well, they're the host regional, so let's give them the regional, because they would probably think, well, if we give them that regional, then they're saying that we're just selling out for the money aspect. So there would be like reverse psychology upon reverse psychology. And in probably all, considering all of that, and all of those implications, it probably is better to just have the computer make a decision.
Right.
So I guess I'll begrudgingly concede this one to you.
Questions. Go Huskies woo. Is there a more 23-24 Huskies way to end the season by losing in a game that we were never behind? 100%.
Well,
only thing more fitting,
it would have been a 2-goal lead.
Yeah, it would have been a 2-goal lead, and then we blow it.
Yeah.
So, Brian Moose, expectations for potential freshmen. So, potential freshmen recruiting. Future episodes will kind of go into that. Maybe even have Brian on for that. Who knows?
Yeah.
Would you like the KVSC guys back on? I'm all
we've got some content to fill in the summer pods. So that sounds like a good idea.
Jason Bryant, what can we do to get more fans to the women's games and all of SCSU sports for that matter? That's kind of the multi-million-dollar question. Is kind of what happened with the turn of attendance and how to get people back into it. Kind of my big thing is more community outreach. I feel like we've got a couple of billboards and whatnot, but I think there could be a little bit more done there. But I would say kind of a big thing is find out who your old season ticket holders were, what the season ticket holder numbers are, and poll them to see why they're not season ticket holders now. And see what the main reasons are, and then fix them. Ask the people who don't go why they're not going anymore. Is I think always a really good way to start.
What do you think some of those potential reasons would be? Because I haven't been a season ticket holder in a while. Is there been a negligible increase in ticket sale or in ticket prices? Is there the food prices are higher? Has there been any significant changes in the last 5 years, let's say, in the in-game experience, either from a cost or quality standpoint?
I don't see it. But I also, go to the games, and I would still go to the games. Now I'm not a season ticket holder, because I don't have the time, with the twins and whatnot. So that is something I am looking forward to doing in the future, though. But arena prices are arena prices, but at the same time, I don't think they're incredibly high. They weren't when I was playing at the X, that's for sure.
Because I'm pretty sure when I was season tickets holder, it was $400 for the season, which typically about 18 games, 20 games. I think it was 1 year, maybe it was 20 games. So you're talking $25 a ticket, essentially, which is a fairly good deal for a good ticket that I had. Maybe it went up to $450 at one point. I can't remember. Like I said, the last time I had seasons was 16, 17. So it's been a little bit.
And they've got different levels as well, because you got the premium chair back.
Yeah,
right?
This was the 203. So I'm sure if you want the ones in the pre-molded, pre-budded seats, those are less expensive. But it's tough, because this is the $1 million question. Because this year aside, not making the tournament, obviously being contender for it, but from an on the ice standpoint, you can't really ask for anything better than the run that St. Cloud's been on for the last 10 years. You had 2 years there where you were number 1 overall seed, making the tournament pretty much every year except 1 or 2 years here. There's not many programs in the country that can boast that sort of on ice success, but that seemingly hasn't translated to an increase in profits or fan interest, because even in those number 1 seed years, it's not like the place was packed on a game by game basis. And I think a lot of the issues stem from a decline in the enrollment at the university. I think that has a lot to do with it. And the thing there is you can't cut prices for season tickets for students because they're already free.
Yeah.
At least I think, is that still the case?
I think that's the case. I think they did put in like an extra barrier of it. Like you have to actually sign up for your ticket beforehand. It's not like hey, let's go to the hockey game type thing. But also, I mean, yeah, enrollment being down, but even when I was there, like, I just felt like St. Cloud was such a suitcase college that, like, it was.
Yeah, really be careful with that. I thought you were going a little bit vulgar.
Oh, no.
With you were slurring over a suitcase there, but
like I just felt like there were so many people that just went home on the weekends, and as a result of that, nothing on campus was open. So it was, I don't know if it was like a chicken or the egg scenario. Whereas are things not open because students aren't there, or students not there because there's nothing to do on the weekends on campus? Like nothing. So it's,
yeah, I'm curious about, because I haven't been living there for 6-7 years.
And maybe when we have the KVSC guys, we can talk about campus
life.
and we'll talk.
Because remember when
I know they have a Chick-fil-A and an Urberts and Gerberts right on campus now. That's much better than
what. Maybe that's where the students are going instead of the games. Maybe have a Chick-fil-A and a Urberts and Gerberts in the Herb.
Oh,
I
would be all for that. That would be.
Maybe we just solved it. But like, yeah, I'm wondering, because when we were going, definitely for UND and Gopher games, you'd have to go to, wasn't called the Herb then, but you'd have to go to the National Hockey Center and you'd line outside the rink to wait for tickets, because yes, they were still free, but you had to pick up the tickets because it was going to be so packed.
Yep.
Do they still do that now?
Yep.
And I kind of doubt it.
Probably not.
That's troubling. Yeah. Part of it's due to the conference split. I mean, that's still lingering, I think, too. But you figure you're seeing the Gophers at least, not this season, but close to every season in non-conference. But I don't know. Part of it's marketing. Part of it is a changing, school and enrollment numbers there. It's difficult with just entertainment dollars. Have so many options to go now. It's just, like I said, I don't have the answers. I more have questions as far as what the possible answers are. Me not having some distance from the university, I'm not as up on those concerns. But I hope they do figure it out. And as far as women's games too, like, I never knew it until one of the last years I had seasons that the men's season ticket package I had also served as a season ticket for the women's team. I didn't know that. I don't know if that would have translated to me going to more women's games, because back then the women's team was terrible. But I don't know if that still is the case. And if it's not, because back then they didn't really advertise that much at all. I wish they would. But it's just, again, I think the same kind of problems that the men's side has. And with the women's team, it's just, hopefully now with the team playing themselves into relevancy, that does pick up the interest around campus as well. That would be great. But yeah, I mean, even look at the women's Frozen Four. There was a smattering of empty seats there. It's just a harder sell than the men's side is. And questions and why that is way beyond my pay grade. Wish it was different, but it's just how it is. But we hope that it can change. And with the St. Cloud in general, it's just how it can be turned around is a big, big question going forward for this university.
And then his follow-up question, what was your single best game moment of this year? That's actually kind of a tough one. Why is that so tough? I was actually thinking about this the other day too. Is like nominations for the Herbies. Like,
oh God,
I don't even know what we're gonna do for goal of the year.
Like, back of my head, I still remembered from November a Molinar play against Miami.
Yes, that's the only one I can think of is the Molinar.
I haven't seen that play in months.
That was a good
but I just remember it being a dazzler.
Yeah.
But I don't know about any of the other two candidates. Maybe that'll just be the only nominee.
Maybe that'll be the only nominee. I'll just have that in the poll.
Well, you brought this up before the show, and we were both kind of stumped, trying to rack our brains about best moment. I got one for you, though, and maybe it's because me and you got to experience it together. But how about that Michigan tying goal with 10 seconds to go with Kupka at that Saturday game against Michigan?
That is true.
That was a good, exciting last second, tied up after
that was
getting down
that
3-0.
attacker goal too, right?
And then that was the winning shootout that you came on the podcast that next show, and you're like, we love shootouts now.
We love shootouts now.
So I think it really kind of wrecked your brain a little bit too.
That's true.
And so that's my real. But I guess we might be spoiling it because best moment is one of the Herbie categories, and this question is essentially asking us for nominees for that category. Maybe we can throw that out to the Twitter base.
Yeah. Well,
see if they've got any
what is everyone else's
suggestions.
favorite moment?
But that's the one I got is that one. But I'm struggling to find many others. And you feel like it's above 500 season. You feel like there's got to be some good moments. It's just we're colored, I think, by that second half.
I think that's the problem. And so maybe I'll just say
we'll
Jason,
come up with some.
Jason Bryant's voice and the fixing of the sound system. Fixing is maybe a little bit of a loaded term, but more clarity in the sound system and Jason's voice going through it. That's what my favorite game moment is.
Yeah, I agree. The fire alarm during Denver, that's up there. That's up there.
That's ominous moment. That'll be for the Herbies, the new category. So, well, that about does her, I suppose. And here we're at. So, thank you everyone for listening. This especially here towards the end, we really appreciate it. Weldie at More Clappers, MOAR More Clappers. Andrew, you can find him at
Andrew at greenground.net and Huskies Hockey Podcast at gmail.com. Either post me or email me and I'll get back to you.
Sounds good. And until next time, go Huskies. Woo!